know that all of the questions being asked, each person will be asked the same questions. So, and we've got about just 15 minutes, I think Jonathan scheduled these for. So just be aware that 8 questions with 15 minutes. And then a follow-up question or two. If there is, it would come from Bill Giffens, myself, Jenny, Karen, or Jonathan. The other council members who are also submitting letters of interest will not be asking any questions. So, Jonathan.
Actually, Karen and I are going to rotate these, but I'll get started. Can you hear me okay, Paul?
I can hear you fine.
Do you live in town year-round, and do you work in town or in Union Township?
I live in town year-round, and I am post-career, so I do not have a job outside of town.
Are you able to reliably attend at least one evening meeting a month, and possibly more to participate in the town's economic development initiatives?
Yes, I am.
Are you familiar with the town's recent plans and projects, and do you agree with the objectives outlined in those?
So I am familiar with the town's previous plans and projects based on some work I did previously on CRC. I agree town council drives the overall plans and our overarching goals. I don't know if we fully have all the goals laid out, and they don't necessarily conflict with each other, but I do believe that town council, after a hearty discussion on how to build an economic plan, is the driving force that CRC and other appointed positions in the town drives to.
Culver is focused on the mission of Stellar Town year-round, and the purpose of this was to find ways to bring full-time residents back to town so that we could improve specific data points, such as our population, the school population, and so on. We are currently working on establishing a plan for economic development. What are your thoughts on what our mission should be for economic development? Or do you think Culver needs to focus on a specific area of economic development, such as workforce development or growth?
Okay, I'll give a multi-part answer. I think we have to have an economic development plan that, because that pretty much drives what we do in redevelopment. I realize there are 2 TIF areas already identified, but how you develop those TIF areas are really can be driven by what our economic development plan is. You know, I see economic development as a way of improving the whole community's, for lack of a better word, well-being, and that's really driven through jobs from major employers, not necessarily Fortune 500 companies, but employers that would come in and make a difference in our world, that would, and in turn that drives people to work here. The only example I can give right now is ACPI. They have 2 supervisor jobs that are open that qualified people can make up to $65,000 a year. I think we should be working with ACPI to help them fill those positions and help bring year-round people to work and live here. So I do concur with the overall goals. I do think economic development, drives that by bringing in other businesses that augment what we're doing as well as a resort town, and brings year-round jobs here. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. Paul and others, I should have started with this. This is a public meeting, and we are recording it, and we'll post it on our YouTube page after the fact. So by staying on and participating, we're taking that as your acknowledgement that you are being recorded and your willingness to participate, and for us to share that recording. Next question we have for you. Do you support an economic development vision that includes quality of life initiatives such as trails, and that includes potential residential development. Also, would you support potential property acquisition if the town or CRC wanted to build a town hall, a shell building, or some other investment? Please explain.
So I agree with the all those concepts, trails and cultural as well as quality of life or quality of place is a component of what we're trying to do in the town and growing our year-round population and making this a place that that people at all income levels can live. I support the idea of looking into residential TIFs and working along those lines as well. I don't know if there's an opportunity for us to work with the Sand Hill Group development and Affinity, which as the backer is more taking a more active role. But I think there are opportunities there. I would say that's a learning area for me. The residential TIF, it's not been necessarily a focus of ours. And as for acquiring property, agree. I think it's better to acquire it once you have a plan, so you know how things fit. Whether if it's a new town hall, repositioning of the fire department and first responders, or lands that come up. But at this point, to me, it feels like we don't have a plan for acquisition, which makes opportunities when they present themselves a little harder to evaluate. That's my answer.
Culver is rural and our resources and funds are limited. Many of our current projects have been paid for with grant funds. Do you support our redevelopment commission making matches on these grants? And please explain to the best of your knowledge when you would or wouldn't support this.
Okay, Karen, I missed the middle part about that. Could you repeat the question?
Yep, Culver is rural and resources and funds are limited. Many of our current projects have been paid for with grant funds. Do you support our redevelopment commission making matches on these grants? And please explain to the best of your knowledge when you would or wouldn't support this.
Certainly. I think leveraging other people's money as awarded through grants is just a smart thing to do. And I think we should do that at any point. And that if CRC is a matching component of that, as long as it's within the scope of what CRC is supposed to be doing, as outlined by the state, and within the scope of what the town is trying to do in its economic development, I would support that. I think we have an extraordinary advantage, and we demonstrated this earlier with COVID by shifting funds that CRC had picked up a bit more of the stellar commitments from the town, and that allowed the town to do more of its own version of a PPP for the individual businesses in town. So that I do support. And again, as for in the future, I think you measure it against what we publicly say we're trying to do as a town in economic development, our ultimate goals as a town, and then communicating that with high level transparency in all our meetings. I think that's fine, and I agree with that.
Next question, Paul, is what do you think uniquely qualifies you to be on the Culver Redevelopment Commission in terms of either your experience or knowledge of economic development? Your experience or your knowledge of economic development. So.
Sure. I don't know if mine's unique. I think you're pretty fortunate that you have quite a few qualified people that are applying for these positions. What I do bring is in two areas. The first is the obvious one. I've been on the board for a couple of years, and I think I've learned a good bit about what Culver needs and is trying to do, and I've had hands-on experience working with Jonathan at the county level on the broadband plan for Marshall County, which helped integrate what we're trying to do with that important area. as well as doing work that you and the town council have been involved in with the municipal utility project. So I bring an understanding of, maybe not unique to the other members, but an understanding of what the town is going through and have learned with that. Experiential, as I put it in my write-up, maybe I'm not just a jack of all trades, but I've had prior experience in corporate America, working in large organizations, leading them in developing their plans, as well as executing them through sales and marketing and regional and area responsibilities. And I've also had, more recently, before my wife and I moved out here, I worked for the federal government in a very large organization, which had to, for lack of a better word, had to effectively learn to make the elephant dance. So there were a lot of people and organizations that were part of initiatives that I was leading that didn't report in or work with me, but I still had to find ways of getting things done with them. And I think that, and I was successful at that enough that they said I was, so I'll believe them, but, and we got major projects done. So that skill set of working with a lot of other entities in a not so well-defined environment, I think fits well here. And then the last piece is I've worked on in community and volunteer organizations through churches, as well as other nonprofit organizations, and understand the environment of working in a semi-volunteer and non-traditional structure. So those are the three things I think I bring.
Right. The last question is, can you provide us an example of when you participated on another town initiative, board, or project that showcases the skills or leadership you can offer the CRC?
Okay. Karen, I heard the first half of that. Could you just repeat it again?
Yep, sorry. Can you provide us an example of when you've participated on another town initiative, board, or project that showcases the skills or leadership you can offer the CRC?
I guess the one that's I could bring up would be the work I did on the task force with Jonathan in broadband. And I think I brought some skills to that about what we could do as a town, what we might need, and how we might leverage other entities to bring low-cost solutions to the people needing broadband in our area. The issue was a little more difficult because the person that was leading that, the consultant leading that, it was the first time he was doing this, and it became apparent there were just things that he was just learning for the first time on how to put something together under a pretty short deadline. So that's been my local involvement. I would say that is probably the piece that I could say I've spoken to. You know, the only other thing I could say is the work with the municipal utility. I've had to articulate the Culver story to IMPA. I've had to articulate the Culver story to the CEO of the Indiana Chamber of Commerce in December, when I spoke with him, as they were talking about energy policy changes that they're trying to get through the legislature. I had to lay out our story and what we're doing, and I've had to articulate. I'd say those are the two areas that I'd say as examples for this question.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Paul, we're right on time. That's all we had for you. So thank you. If you want to stick around and listen to those, you're welcome.
Well, I have no life. I actually have a 5 o'clock call to do, so I appreciate that. And then thank you all for the opportunity. And I'm glad to answer any other questions that you may have.
Paul, Bill Githens, I got one question for you. Said you did some work for the federal government. What agency did you work with or for? What were you doing in that capacity?
Certainly, Bill. I was the Chief of Human Capital Planning and Development for the Army's Research and Development Organization in Aberdeen, Maryland. So the Army has approximately 10,000 scientists and engineers spread across the United States. You know, they're working in everything that flies, drives, shoots on the future development. And I applied for and was recruited in to do that position of leading our human capital, putting new plans in place, putting new policies in place, as well as new initiatives on development of that organization. And yeah, it was quite and it was a new position. It's something they've never done before. So as you know, the federal government is just not the best place to drive change. So it was quite an education, but it was fun. We got a lot.
Thanks, Paul.
You okay?
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Next up, we have John Rogers. John, can you hear me? If you would unmute yourself.
Hi, yes. Hey, Jonathan, I'm here.
Thanks for joining us. You ready to get started?
Yes.
All right, Karen and I will just go back and forth again with the same list of questions. And if Jenny or Bill have any follow-ups, they'll do so. So first question is just, do you live in town year round, and do you work in town or in Union Township?
Yes, I live in town and I do work at Culver Academies.
Okay. Are you able to reliably attend at least one evening meeting a month and possibly more if you participate in the town's economic development initiatives?
Yes.
Are you familiar with the town's recent plans and projects, and do you agree with the objectives outlined in those?
Yes, I think I'm fairly well. I used to attend before my daughter was born. My wife and I used to attend quite a few of the town council meetings, and I was excited about the Stellar Strategic Initiative Plan. And I appreciated seeing sort of the outline and the thoughtfulness of the efforts to try and grow sort of the year-round population, and as a key to helping boost revenue for the school, and also sort of the bike trail and the development of more affordable housing, I think, are all initiatives that, in my mind, made sense to try and think strategically about how to leverage the great assets that we have, the natural assets we have on our lake, while also complementing those as a town to develop it so that we can attract the future generation of Culver citizens.
Great. This one's kind of a long question, so bear with me. Culver on the mission of Stellar Town year-round, and the purpose of this was to find ways to bring full-time residents back to town so that we could improve specific data points, such as our population, the school population, and so on. We are currently working on establishing a plan for economic development. What are your thoughts on what our mission should be for economic development? Or do you think Culver needs to focus on a specific area of development, of economic development, such as workforce development or growth?
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a great question. I'm coming from this, I think, as a young parent, and so thinking about the economic development, yes. So I think I'll answer that. I think that's key first and foremost, is to make town attractive for small businesses, but also make it attractive for full-time employers. And so it's a both and there that I think is a thorny question, a really hard, challenging question that lots and lots of towns across the country are facing. And so I don't know if I have a clear answer, of course, but those are the two things that come to mind is what services are provided by whether it's the town itself and public utilities or private sector and small businesses that are here that would be attractive to people who would want to live in town and be in town, close to town. We have a number of those, obviously, already, great restaurants and great opportunities, but are there more that could be attractive and appealing to younger families? That's something that's on my mind, as well as the idea of finding viable full-time employment and professionals who would want to live here. And so thinking through that seems to be something in terms of economic development that should be a focus for the town, knowing the demographic challenges.
Do you support an economic development vision that includes quality of life initiatives such as trails, and that includes potential residential development? Also, would you support potential property acquisition if the town or CRC wanted to build a town hall, a shell building, or some other investment? Please explain.
So I heard Paul's answer, and I don't know if I think, not to like piggyback or adopt his answer completely, but I found it appealing that if we have a clear purpose behind the acquisition, that makes sense. And so if there's if it's part of a bigger, broader general plan or project as it suits us and as we think through what the vision of the town looks like in 2030 or 2040 and what this town will be and who we want to be, and that acquisition of that property and then the redevelopment of it makes sense given that landscape, then I would be on board. So it's a case-by-case basis, I guess, it's a long way of saying case by case. Depends on, I think, what the purpose would be and how it fits into a broader plan and goals and objectives of the town.
Culver is rural and our resources and funds are limited. Many of our current projects have been paid for with grant funds. Do you support our redevelopment commission making matches on those grants? And please explain to the best of your knowledge when you would or wouldn't support this.
Grant funds, obviously for a town with, of course, limited resources makes complete sense, and I'm glad we're taking advantage of it. It's prudent. And I guess the question already sort of asks you to think about when is those cases, case by case, when it makes sense. When it's in the purview of the CRC and our work on redevelopment, or sort of just, I think, maintaining economic viability of various businesses and industries as we continue to try and redevelop the town, or continue to help it grow and thrive, then I think it makes sense. I don't have a clear specific case where I would say yes or no in my mind about where I would say yes to match or no to match. I'm sorry if I don't have anything more specific or concrete to offer, but generally speaking, I think if it makes sense given the goals and if it's within the purview of the CRC and our mission, then I would be on board.
Thanks. Next question, what do you think uniquely qualifies you to be on the Culver Redevelopment Commission in terms of either your experience or knowledge of economic development?
Yeah, I don't know if I have anything, honestly, that what I would say that uniquely qualifies me. I'm a political science teacher, I teach American government, I teach economics, and so the terminology, the ideas behind market-based incentives and principles, and the logic and arguments that economists present for how to design and structure an economy are well on my mind often as I think about them and talk about them with students all the time. And so I think that puts me in a position where I've thought about it quite a bit. And part of the reason why I want to do this and be a part of this commission is that I think a lot about politics and I think a lot about government. But I'm kind of ashamed to say, a little bit ashamed, that I haven't put that in action as much as I need to. I'm a consistent voter. I pay attention to what the town council is doing, but I don't really get in the weeds and I was like make my case or try and really contribute. And I guess with a young daughter, I have a 1-year-old and wanting her to grow up in this town and feeling as if I'm going to model for my students the type of citizen I want them to be, then I want to get in the weeds and help and contribute and serve my community. And so this opportunity arose, and I thought that my skill set as a teacher of economics might help me a little bit in this. And so I thought, why not take a chance and throw my name in the ring? I like thinking about business and development, and so I hope that interest and that my reading and my constant sort of contemplation around economics and business would put me in a position to learn quickly and pick up speed and be hopefully a thoughtful contributor. I also think being maybe the demographic in some ways that we maybe are trying to appeal to as a town to attract and retain. As a 35-year-old father of a daughter, I might be able to consider or empathize more with people who would be considering coming to this town, and so providing ideas and suggestions or asking questions from that lens of somebody who's in their 20s or 30s or early 40s maybe, who is looking to raise a family here. I am that person, and so I might be able to provide that perspective. So that might be helpful to the CRC.
This is the final question. Can you provide us an example of when you've participated on another town initiative, board, or project that showcases the skills or leadership you can offer to the CRC?
So I kind of admitted in the last answer that I've kind of sat on the sidelines quite a bit, and I'm a little ashamed of that. Not so much so that I'm not willing to share it here in a public recording and with 12 other people on the call, but it's something that I want to change. And so I don't have a specific example of my leadership or contributions to town that could speak to my leadership or my skills. I am one of the current department chairs of the humanities department at Culver. And so that has uniquely put me in a position to manage people and lead people and provide inspiration and coaching. And I think that experience I could speak to as one that would showcase my leadership as I help run a department of 30 people. And so that oversight there, I think, is something I could bring as we consider about the ways to pitch an idea and the ways to sort of shape the vision or articulate our goals and continue to follow up and process those goals over a year or 2 years or 3 years, hopefully.
Thank you, John. Jenny or Bill, do you have any more questions?
No, just one quick question, John, about we've been working on an economic development plan in the very early stages of it at this point. And we're hoping that we can engage all the stakeholders in Culver. We've had some economic development summits with an outside expert consultant working with us. Is that something that you think your schedule could accommodate participating in addition to serving on the CRC?
Maybe, I don't know. I hadn't considered that. Possibly, it would be something I'd be interested in learning more about, or the schedule at least, and thinking through the timing of that, and coordinating with my family. But I don't see why I couldn't make time for it. And if it's something that I'd be interested in for sure. Okay,
great, thank you.
Anything else? All right, thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Thank you for the time. I appreciate it. I know that you've got a lot to do, and I appreciate the due diligence you're all doing to try and put together a great CRC. So good luck to you all as you select. And I know there's lots of great candidates, so thank you.
Thanks. Okay, the next one up we had scheduled for 5 o'clock is not going to be here.
Okay.
So I didn't give the 3 applicants that are on council a specific time. Do you want to do one of those now? We don't have anyone scheduled until 5:15.
Yeah. Would one of you be willing to come step up to the table just so that your voice is recorded, and then we can do yours as well? Since, the one is not.
Everybody take 2 steps backwards here.
Thank you, Rich.
Sure.
All right. I'm gonna have Rich West step in and do the 5 o'clock. So, Rich, I'll get it started with the first question. Do you live in town year round, and do you work in town or in Union Township?
Yes, I live in town full time, and I have a real estate license. I practice on a part-time basis, but that is in Culver and in the Martin County.
Are you able to reliably attend at least one evening meeting a month, and possibly more if you participate in the town's economic development initiatives?
Yes.
Are you familiar with the town's recent plans and projects, and do you agree with the objectives outlined in those?
Yes, I'm familiar with both the history of our planning process and economic development process, as well as the current initiatives that we've undertaken, being involved in stellar activities and the initiatives there, and other things, projects that we've undertaken. So yes.
Here's the long one.
Okay.
Culver has focused on the mission of Stellar Town year round, And the purpose of this was to find ways to bring full-time residents back to town so that we could improve specific data points, such as our population, the school population, and so on. We are currently working on establishing a plan for economic development. What are your thoughts on what our mission should be for economic development? Or do you think Culver needs to focus on a specific area of economic development, such as workforce development or growth?
I think our economic development plan needs to be multifaceted. I think there's a very broad spectrum of things that we can do from a redevelopment perspective. I think there are increasing numbers of things like the residential tip that we can take on. I think I think some of the primary objectives of what we need to do are supporting our current business environment, building upon that. I think in terms of the broad spectrum, I think the quality of life and quality of place is an important piece to that. I think workforce development is another area that I think we should begin to focus more on. I think the development of a residential TIF is something we need to explore further. And I think, again, creating and continuing partnerships to move the ball forward in terms of economic development.
Do you support an economic development vision that includes quality of life initiatives such as trails, and that includes potential residential development? Also, would you support potential property acquisition if the town or CRC wanted to build a town hall, a shell building, or some other investment? Please explain.
I think on the property acquisition, I think as both Paul and John pointed out, it has to fit into an overall plan. There are opportunities that will probably come up at a split second, or that we should probably evaluate on an individual basis. But generally, I think if we're moving on an initiative, it should be part of it as an overall strategy and not just sort of a harebrained idea that we chase after. I think the residential TIF is something that, as I mentioned earlier, that we can certainly explore, and I think has a potential to achieve some of our objectives as far as increasing the data points in town, supporting the school more, and even local employer bases. I think on quality of life and quality of place, I think those are important components to attracting people to town, to making it a place that employers would be interested in, because it would be more attractive for their employees to live and work in our community. And working on affordable housing is one of our first steps in that area, I think.
Culver is rural and our resources and funds are limited, and many of our current projects have been paid for with grant funds. Do you support our redevelopment commission making matches on those grants? And please explain to the best of your knowledge when you would or wouldn't support this.
I definitely would support them and have supported them in the past, as long as it's within the scope of what the redevelopment commission is permitted to do and how they're permitted to spend their funds. I think in the past year, we've been well within the legal guidelines, but we've been creative in terms of how the redevelopment commission can help the town use their funding to help the local economy through the pandemic situation. So I think that the fact that we've leveraged the dollars with a lot of the stellar projects, where we've got millions and millions of dollars, where the project's done by contributing a percentage of that, and as long as that's within the scope of what the redevelopment commission is permitted to do, I would strongly support that and have.
What do you think uniquely qualifies you to be on the Culver Redevelopment Commission in terms of either your experience or knowledge of economic development?
I don't know that there's anything unique about it. I think one of the aspects that I think speaks strongly to my candidacy is a double-edged sword, and that's experience. I mean, I've been on the redevelopment commission 2014 and 15, and again 2017 through the current, so I have a good understanding about what the redevelopment commission can and should be doing. Also, being on the town council, I think I create or have a link to what our overall objectives are, and having been involved in several of the planning processes and the our Stellar application, I think none of that is necessarily unique, but I think it does provide me with a good deal of insight into sort of where we're going and what we think we should be doing and how we can get there.
And then the final question, can you provide us an example of when you've participated on another town initiative, board, or project that showcases the skills or leadership you can offer the CRC?
There are a couple that, the one that most that comes to mind firsthand is where we're sitting right now in the Beach Lodge. I think that I was, both from the council perspective and from the CRC perspective, a very active participant in both the planning and execution process on the renovation and remodeling of this building. And there was a strong advocate for making this building accessible and adding the elevator to the building here. In my past life, I've done a lot of facilities management and project management. And so I've had a fair amount of experience in that. I think the other example is with the Stellar initiatives and some of the projects there.
All right. Jenny or Bill? Yeah.
Bill, you have any other?
I'm done.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Rich.
Rich?
We're at 5:06.
Okay.
Rich went right very quickly. So,
It's going really fast.
do you want to do another one here or take a little break and wait for the next person?
Who's at 5:15?
That,
Dorothea.
Dorothea Ragsdale.
Thanks.
Okay.
At 5:15. And she was planning on coming in person, so.
Okay. I think then we should probably take a break because I wouldn't want her to walk in the middle of someone else and feel
Take a 5-minute break.
blindsided, but yeah. Right. Taking a long time.
Page first.
Yeah.
Like a 15 feet. Page first, please.
Yes. Pretty much you and me both. Well, the volume should.
How are you?
I'm freezing.
Christmas breeze to.
I'm going.
I'm Oh, yeah. Maybe there's a draft or something, something's making it cold, but.
Russell Reagan, they get his kids when they go through this. We are so. I mean, I didn't even know.
Right by the
Threw it out
door.
onto the ground for the chicken. Pretty aggressive. The other side of the Zoom.
Yeah.
They love it.
So you're working all week?
Yeah,
Hey,
no,
wait.
I got 1 egg today, so.
You're working all week?
Except
He's okay, he's internalized a little bit.
Just either they're getting too old.
Yeah, I saw
that.
or more than-
I was part of
We
it.
don't know when the funeral is.
Yeah, I was part of this.
I
was
think
both sure.
she has it upset, his wife's not
Like
listening.
Timmy is found out.
Yeah.
But,
Took you 3 hours to simmer down before I responded.
I figured it would.
That's okay.
Yeah, I figured it. I figured as much,
So we're still waiting.
but it was his
when
idea.
it's.
I'm sure it was.
It was his idea, but I
He
just.
was able to see him in the hospital the week before. And
So did you
then
ever,
the day
did you ever
before,
hear directly back from Tracy or anything?
went to see him.
No, no, I
That
wonder,
was honestly
No,
the
no,
last
not
time.
at all.
I don't.
I wonder whether she said something about, you know,
Little tractor I had.
So-
like,
All right, we're gonna get restarted here. And we've got Dorothea Ragsdale.
Yes.
And Karen and I are just gonna go back and forth and ask you, I think about 8 questions that we have. And then if Jenny or Bill have follow-ups, we'll let them do that as well. So first question is just, do you live in town year round and do you work in town or in Union Township?
All right. Please forgive my ignorance, and I'm trying to make myself educated about this, but I believe the town starts where around where the Noel residence is. Okay, so I work at the academy. I live on this end of, let's see, I'm on West Terrace. So I believe that's within the town,
Yes.
right? Okay, because I do pay my water bill to the town.
Correct.
That's good. That explains that. And this is my 11th year now.
Excellent.
Are you able to reliably attend at least one evening meeting a month and possibly more if you participate in the town's economic development initiatives?
Yes, provided that it does not conflict with any, right now, I am the second year president for Tri-Kappa, and we do have our meetings the third Monday on evenings. So, but I would juggle things as much as I possibly could. And right now, those meetings are pretty much on hold. So.
Are you familiar with the town's recent plans and projects, and do you agree with the objectives outlined in those?
I'm familiar with some of the plans, but again, I am still in the process of making myself familiar with most of those.
This is a long question, so Culver has focused on the mission of Stellartown year-round, and the purpose of this was to find ways to bring full-time residents back to town so that we could improve specific data points, such as our population, the school population, and so on. We are currently working on establishing a plan for economic development. What are your thoughts on what our mission should be for economic development? Or do you think Culver needs to focus on a specific area of economic development, such as workforce development or growth?
That was a lot.
Anyway, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
It's quite all right.
That was me.
Oh, I wasn't gonna.
All right, the first part of that question, you were asking, that obviously this has to do with whether I'm familiar with the current plan. And this also has to do with Stellar Culver, which was a marketing plan, I believe, in order to attract more businesses. Is that correct?
Yeah, businesses and residents. Sort of a overall vision was to bring back full-time residents year-round and improve population, school population, and attract business by improving quality of place.
Right. In my short tenure here as an adult, because I was here as a student many, many years ago, I have observed that we have different constituencies in Culver, and different constituencies have different needs. I do know, for example, at the academy, when we recruit new faculty, we are always interested in bringing in young families and the needs that come with bringing in new families. And again, we don't want them to just stay for 2 or 3 years. We're very interested in keeping them as permanent residents. I have spoken with Karen Schumann on several occasions about the state of the schools, and that's a very different conversation. But I know what the concerns are with that issue as well. Yes, there should be many ways of attracting residents, permanent residents to this area. But I think we also have to be very, very careful to preserve there's a little bit of panache in being a resort community. But again, we need to have citizens who are going to feel that they are contributing to this, and that it's not just kind of a service type of a life here, that they're actually able to have things that they require, a good education for their children, no matter what schools they use, that they feel safe, And that if they actually do come and invest in Culver and have a business, that they at least have a feeling of certainty that their business will succeed and will not, that, you know, they'll be able to at least rely on that for a while. Now, some of that is part of their own business model, but things that we do not have control over are the weather, A, and B, the way that those businesses are run. And one of the things that I've been thinking about as I was thinking about applying for this position was that other than restaurants, retail, and service, what other types of things could we bring to this town which would bring in permanent residents? So I'm still working on that. I do have a question, if I may, with that.
Sure.
Have surveys been done for the residents of this area or through the Chamber of Commerce as to what are some of the businesses that they would like to see here?
Yeah, I think a couple different surveys exist and some documentation. So I think the last time the town did a comprehensive plan and then also our Main Street group this last year, a lot of economic development people will do a gap analysis. So they'll, you know, it's just kind of part of the deal that you get with those. They'll look at what businesses are in your area, the amount of income, the amount of residents, and try to identify some gaps, some areas where you could try to attract someone where people are traveling to Plymouth or somewhere else to spend their money on that particular area. So I think those two studies were both in the last 7 years where we've had some documentation on that. As far as actual surveys with residents, though, not one off the top of my head. I think those are probably the two things I would look to for information on that.
And these surveys are part of the record?
The comprehensive plan, yes. The one that was performed by Main Street is not owned by the town. It was done by a nonprofit group, our Main Street group.
Did I complete or did I miss?
Yes,
something?
I think so.
Yeah, there's also a Marshall County, some surveys were done for the regional stellar development plan for Marshall County, and some of those were very business focused. You know, and some of them were about all the communities and not just the county in general. So, and those are really incorporated into the regional development plan.
Next question is, do you support an economic development vision that includes quality of life initiatives such as trails and that includes potential residential development? Also, would you support potential property acquisition if the town or CRC wanted to build a town hall, a shell building, or some other investment? Please explain.
I'm sorry, you were talking, what was that one, a town hall, a shell building?
A shell building, so a manufacturing building that would be basically the shell of it built by the town and then marketed to industrial
Like
companies.
our cabinet company here.
Right, but you would just really build the exterior and get the utilities to it, and then you kind of place it up for sale to try and attract, you know, a new factory or something like that to come in and finish the build out, bring their equipment and all that kind of thing.
If you're familiar with Pretzels in Plymouth, that was a shell building that was done by MCEDC, and it sat vacant for a few years, and the person who ran MCEDC got a hold of Pretzel and they came into Plymouth. But a shell building just sat vacant for, you never know how long.
Okay. I have a question because again, with, if you're talking about having permanent residents here, if somebody acquires that and they need workers, will those workers be able to afford living in this area? I think that's pretty important. Will they be able to take advantage of the school opportunities, et cetera with that? So would I support it? I don't know. I don't know that much about how that would work, but the thing that just comes, the immediate concern would be, will those workers be able to be residents of our town as well?
Can you talk, sorry, there were multiple questions. Do you want to talk about the first one? So the first one was just about whether you support an economic development vision that includes quality of life initiatives
Yes,
such
absolutely.
as trails.
Yes.
Thank you.
Nature, did I hear a rumor somewhere that they wanted to do a bike trail all the way around the lake?
Right.
So that when we have magnificent program of the Lake Max tour, it didn't, you know, so we're not on the road, so they actually have their own. Thank you, okay.
Culver is rural and our resources and funds are limited, and many of our current projects have been paid for with grant funds. Do you support our redevelopment commission making matches on those grants? And please explain to the best of your knowledge when you would or would not support this.
So the redevelopment commission would match the grants. Where are the grants coming from?
We've had a variety of grants, all the way from like the Indiana Department of Transportation, for some of the trail projects, the sidewalks that are going in on State Road 10, that was all part of this, and all part of the Stellar program as well. So there are a variety of different sources for grants that we've applied to, and many of these grants have a local match. So like the NDOT projects, we would have to come up with 20% of the cost, and NDOT would pay 80%. So that local match, we need to decide who's going to pay for it. And for the last couple of years, the CRC has taken up some of those matches where they see fit. So I guess the question would be, would you support CRC continuing that practice?
I think that would be important, but I also think we should look for alternate sources of revenue so that, and maybe other partners as well for some of that matching. And also that increases at least the funding that you have to go after ambitious projects especially. So.
What do you think uniquely qualifies you to be on the Culver Redevelopment Commission in terms of either your experience or knowledge of economic development?
I have not been involved with other organizations vis-a-vis economic development. However, I do read a lot about this. I do keep up with what happens. When I was living in Virginia, we moved into a very small town called Leesburg, Virginia, outside of DC, and in the very short amount of time that we were there, it exploded. It exploded. So, and I really did keep track of who were the developers, what were the businesses, what were they doing, what was happening with small businesses, medium-sized businesses, et cetera. Just so I became very, very interested in this. What qualifies me is I would bring maybe a different pair of eyes. The other thing is I am Hispanic female. I don't know if that helps you with your quotas, but that might be something, and it shouldn't all rely on a quota system at all. But I do believe that having lived abroad and having been in different communities, speaking several different languages, and just having a multicultural outlook, I think that would help. And again, in attracting different citizens or new residents here, you may have people from abroad as well, and we're beginning to see that. And I think it's important that they feel that they're being represented as well.
And this is the final question. Can you provide us an example of when you participated on another town initiative, board, or project that showcases the skills or leadership you can offer the CRC?
All right. My style of leadership is I'm a quiet, kind of behind the scenes type of a person. I don't need to have my name out there, but I do like to get the work done, and I'm pretty diligent about making sure that it gets done. Most recently, actually thinking, when I lived in Wilmington, Delaware, I served on the board of the Junior League of Wilmington, and that was a fairly large organization. And one of the things that the projects that we did, it wasn't all about teas and dances and whatnot. Many of the projects that we brought to that town, we would write the grants, get the seed money initially, and I'm thinking specifically of a center for young women and men. And this was before, well, and families as well. This was before these projects were more endemic. My daughter right now is writing grants for a homeless shelter in Chicago. And we got into this conversation, and I didn't realize that we were one of the first. We set up a residential facility, funded it, hired the director, and then once it could stand on its own 2 feet, then we gave it to the community. And most of our projects were arranged that way. And so as a member of the board, I was part of the group that studied these projects and the feasibility studies on them. And then I actually went in and volunteered with the residents, once they were already established, and that still exists. So it was basically for people who had obstacles in their lives, but there was a process of education. That was the part that I usually got involved with, where they were either evicted from their homes, or there was maybe an issue with, their own personal lives, et cetera, they would come and live in the residence. They got parenting education, they got nutrition information, job skills. We taught them how to fish, if you remember that analogy. And then after 3 years, then the director was always part of our group, and after 3 years, then the group became part of the community itself. So that's the type of work that personally I'm interested in.
Interesting. Jenny or Bill, any follow-up?
Anything? No, I just want to thank you for coming in though, and
Well, thank you.
this is a very casual atmosphere we've set up for it, and I appreciate everybody who's gone through this process. So thanks very much.
Well, thank you very much. I will write you a little email, and I might have a couple of questions. I was just interested more than what are the relationships between the Chamber of Commerce and, with all of this, because I know that all these groups need to speak with each other.
Yeah, that's a good
Yeah,
question.
absolutely. Well, we are undergoing an economic development initiative. And I've tried to ask everyone, but I keep forgetting to, from a scheduling standpoint, beyond the CRC monthly meeting, we're hoping that stakeholders of all these key organizations, Chamber, Develop Culver, CRC, Council, et cetera, that we get people to participate in that particular planning initiative. From a schedule standpoint, you feel like you could do more than a monthly meeting and
Yes.
participate in some of that? Okay,
Absolutely.
great.
I think this, well, I'm speaking to the choir, but you know what it is like over there. But I think this year, things have loosened up just a little bit, and as long as we can still meet our obligations there, and again, we have ways of moving things around, so it's not a problem. I did bring a full resume, if anybody would like to have that.
Okay, great. That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dorothea.
Thank you, good to see you.
It's still on schedule.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gary, come on up. All right, next up is Gary Perrick. Gary, thanks for coming today.
Good afternoon. Thanks for reaching out and getting this scheduled.
Yeah, thanks for showing up on short notice. Karen and I are just going to rotate questions, just like you saw the end of that one. So we got 8 questions for you. And if Jenny or Bill from council have any follow-ups, they'll jump in. So first question is, do you live in town year round, and do you work in town or in township?
Yeah, so since the COVID, I've been here pretty much every day. So that's closing in on 10 months now, almost a year, and been working remotely from my house in Culver on a daily basis.
Are you able to reliably attend at least one evening meeting a month and possibly more if you participate in the town's economic development initiative?
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason being is that my firm is actually reevaluating how people work and where they work. And the model of the future will probably be, 20% capacity in the offices, which is, no more than 2 days per partner or full-time equivalent, which will leave me, the great bulk of the week here in Culver, which I really enjoy, kind of working from here.
Are you familiar with the town's recent plans and projects, and do you agree with the objectives outlined in those?
I am not familiar with them.
So do you want to?
Yeah, well, I guess we could give you a general idea of, the main plans are a comprehensive plan and our strategic investment plan, which is the same thing as Stellar, which I'm guessing you've probably heard of Stellar. And the general gist of the Stellar plan came out of sort of that comprehensive planning phase. Comprehensive plan speaks to just all areas of your community, from utilities to transportation, et cetera. And the Stellar plan was really kind of started with a 5-year action plan. And the main objective was to create a stellar town year round, where we had assessed and analyzed the community and found decreasing population, decreasing school population, and some other data that concerned us. So our goal was ultimately to do projects and meet objectives that would bring full-time residents to Culver who would spend their money here, that would also create a workforce to attract businesses here, because we have definitely a lack of workforce. And so that was pretty much the main gist of those plans. And from a redevelopment standpoint, we've always tried to get redevelopment to support and align with the town council on our plans and objectives. So one of my concerns is making sure that anyone I appoint is aligned with some of those objectives that we're trying to take care of and doesn't fight it, in other words. So that's where I think the root of that question comes from.
Yeah, I think, being appointed to the CRC, my thought would be is I would be, focused on, positions of who appointed me or who put me into that position. So I believe I would be in alignment with most of the initiatives that have been in that plan.
And the lead up to this question kind of follows a little bit of what Jenny said, and it's also a little bit long, so bear with me. Culver's focused on the mission of Stellar Town year-round, and the purpose of this was to find ways to bring full-time residents back to town so that we could improve specific data points such as our population, the school population, and so on. We are currently working on establishing a plan for economic development. What are your thoughts on what our mission should be for economic development? Or do you think Culver needs to focus on a specific area of economic development, such as workforce development or growth?
Yeah, so bringing new residents to town, I think, we've got a golden opportunity here because of COVID and the remote working. So I think catering to that type of residents, and I don't know what the specifics for that would be, but that would be, a very positive way to get more residents. As far as getting residents to live in town that actually work in town that aren't remote, potentially, housing. I know it's been addressed, but the affordability of housing needs to be addressed because I think a lot of the jobs in town may not be able to compete with the real estate prices, rents or acquisitions of property. Is that, I know it's a lengthy question, but
It's a good question.
I think you answered it, yeah.
Next question, do you support an economic development vision that includes quality of life initiatives such as trails, and that includes potential residential development? Also, would you support potential property acquisition if the town or CRC wanted to build a town hall, a shell building, or some other investment? Please explain.
Yeah, I think that the trails, that's a really good aspect. I think people need to somehow reconnect with nature and also be able to connect the town, through these trails, whether they're bike trails, walking trails, hiking trails, or what have you. I think that's very important. And that's healthy because, if you're working remote, getting away from technology and being able to flow through the town without worrying about getting hit by a car or anything like that is very important. The shell building, that's very intriguing. I would be for something like that, but I think, it would be a very good idea to kind of invest in research in determining what type of shell building will have the highest rate of success. Potentially it's something, and I haven't really investigated this, but potentially some sort of cooperative, facility where someone who's a startup, doesn't have infrastructure, but they can get time inside this facility. I don't know how that exactly would work, but I think that could bring, more economic development if someone is, out of town trying to build something with prototypes. They may not have the access to the capital, but if the CRC were involved, potentially that could become a possibility and lure entrepreneurial types that may not have readily available capital in their, phase one of their business. And there was another one, something about residential housing in there. I'm sorry, I may have gone over that one. It was trails, shell building and
Yeah, residential development was the other one. So,
residential development. Yeah, I mean, I think residential develop, if there's, I guess the longer I've been here remote, I've noticed there's a lot of, how should we put it, property that could be acquired and, that looks abandoned, that doesn't look very productive currently. And it could be someone's, a nice home for someone. So somehow, how do you get those parcels on the market to get their highest and best use rather than something, on a bespoke that, I guess I'm not going into the details, but it's an eyesore. It's with that.
Culver is rural and our resources and funds are limited, and many of our current projects have been paid for with grant funds. Do you support our redevelopment commission making matches on those grants? And please explain to the best of your knowledge when you would or would not support this.
Yeah, I think, the development committee and the town should work in tandem, and, they should work as a team, because I think there's strength in numbers. And as far as what instance, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but if there was some, like the shell building, if somehow the town and the committee wanted to collaborate, I think that would be a good endeavor. Or something in the residential area as well, or connecting the town with trails and walkways and so forth. I would be in favor of any potential matching that we could, that the CRC could provide.
what do you think uniquely qualifies you to be on the Culver Redevelopment Commission in terms of either your experience or knowledge of economic development?
Yeah, being in town, for the, every day, I've been a resident since 2016, but I think my public accounting experience, my finance experience, my my law degree, dealing with tax policy, not at the county level or the local level, but more at the state level, multi-jurisdictional level. I mean, I think all those things would be positive inputs during discussions to spend CRC funds on a prospective basis.
And this is the final question. Can you provide us an example of when you've participated on another town initiative, board, or project that showcases the skills or leadership you can offer the CRC?
Yes, so when I lived in Tampa, there was a tax exempt or nonprofit called Metropolitan Ministries, and the theme of it was families that have lost their job or their money get separated typically, and Metropolitan Ministries attempted to unify the families, assuming the residents took regular drug tests, they were searching for work, or they were involved in upgrading their skills so they can get out on their feet on a go-forward basis. I was a board member of that, and I supported that. It wasn't a governmental agency, but it was well thought of in the Tampa community. How can we get folks that have, not by no fault of their own, fallen on a negative financial situation, how can we keep the family unit together? I found that extremely important. And then how can we get these people trained, through this tax exempt experience?
Jenny or Bill?
On going back to shell buildings, do you have a preference of looking at a manufacturer or an industrial type shell building, or say a professional shell building that would house attorneys, accountants, et cetera? Do you have an idea of which of those you would think would fit better in Culver?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't crunched the numbers.
Not talking about numbers, I'm talking about concept.
I think the manufacturing facility, I would support that.
I'm good. I appreciate that you would come in and spend some time with us in a very casual and random format that we came up with. So thank you for doing that, Gary. I appreciate it. And appreciate getting to know you better.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to any questions you may have, or I can send them out to you. I've got all your email addresses and potential next steps.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your interest, Gary.
Yeah.
We'll pick it up next.
Remaining.
Yep, Sally or Bill, I
Okay.
didn't assign them time, so.
All right. Sally, you want to come up?
Just in case.
All right, Sally, same questions, here we go. Do you live in town year round and do you work in town or in Union Township?
I live in town. I've lived here many years. And I used to work at the academy. I've retired. So I've done a couple of things since then.
There's a lot of work involved in the houses.
Yeah.
Are you able to reliably attend at least one evening meeting a month and possibly more if you participate in the town's economic development initiatives?
I believe I can.
Are you familiar with the town's recent plans and projects, and do you agree with the objectives outlined in those?
I am aligned with councils and being on the council and the CRC. I think that the CRC definitely needs to support the initiatives that the council proposes.
Here's the long one. So,
Yeah.
you ready?
Yeah. Maybe you should stop halfway.
Okay. So Culver has focused on the mission of Stellar Town year-round. The purpose of this was to find ways to bring full-time residents back to town so that we could improve specific data points, such as our population, the school population, and so on. We are currently working on establishing a plan for economic development. And what are your thoughts on what our mission should be for economic development? Or do you think Culver needs to focus on a specific area of economic development, such as workforce development or growth?
I think that, in the long run, you need to focus on both economic development and workforce. You need, Culver needs to be a well-rounded town. I think if you get workforce in here, and I've thought for years that housing, if you can get housing so that people can come and work here, and their jobs exist, and if we can get more jobs and more businesses to come in to Culver, that's the ideal, because we do need more students in the schools and more people in the community as a whole.
What's my spot? Do you support an economic development vision that includes quality of life initiatives such as trails, and that includes potential residential development? Also, would you support potential property acquisition if the town or CRC wanted to build a town hall, a shell building, or some other investment? Please explain.
First, I do support the trails and the idea of having a place to walk, places to trail around the lake, a trail going from one town to the next. And one thing, we had a trail that went to Plymouth, and a trail that went down to Rochester and other towns and went throughout. They're working on one that goes throughout the state, or on trails that go throughout the state. That brings more people into Culver to shop that do those sorts of things. We support the restaurants, shop and gift shops, and if if they're walking, they're not gonna buy gas, but, you know, if they're and if they're on a bicycle, they won't be either, but, they can certainly stop there for snacks. Second,
The other part was residential development or property acquisition. Thoughts on those?
I really think that we do need to, you know, continue with residential development, houses throughout town. And the other thing, the
Last one
we
was,
do definitely need a new town hall. I was trying to, the building's old and, yeah, it needs, sprucing up won't do it. So, I think that in the, you know, in the next few years, we will need to build a new town hall, acquisitions for other properties, it's not good use for them. I can definitely get behind that. Certainly not buying property for the sake of just buying property.
As you know, Culver is rural and our resources and funds are limited, and many of our current projects have been paid for by with grant funds. Do you support our redevelopment commission making matches on these grants? And please explain to the best of your knowledge when you would or would not support this.
I definitely believe that CRC should support the matching portion of the grants. Most of the grants we've had are for the improvement of the town and the business area. So they do fit in to what CRC is allowed to fund. For those things that we can't fund, because by law, we're not allowed to, then of course we can't.
what do you think uniquely qualifies you to be on the Culver Redevelopment Commission in terms of either your experience or knowledge of economic development?
Well, I've been on the redevelopment commission for probably 4 years now, and on the town council as well. So I have experience in what we've been working toward over the last few years. And, you know, I want to continue to support that. I don't know that that makes me uniquely qualified. I've got experience in, you know, supervisory experience, both with the ambulance service and with the security in the academy for years. So, I've always, I almost decided to become an accountant but I flipped the coin and went into law enforcement instead. You think I could sit long enough for an accounting position?
Can you provide us an example of when you participated on another town initiative, board, or project that showcases the skills or leaderships you can offer the CRC?
Well, I've been, you know, I was on the town council when we started the Stellar program. I think I worked more on the first one than I did on the second, due to some constraints that I had. But I was supportive of the Sand Hill project and numerous other projects that we have.
Do you have any follow-up questions, Phil?
Nope.
Same here. Thank you.
Thank
Sally.
All right, thank you. Next.
Dulcie, you're up. All right, Bill, first question. Do you live in town year round and do you work in town or in Union Township?
Yes, I live in town year round, and I'm also a substitute teacher in the Colorado Community School Corporation.
Are you able to reliably attend at least one evening meeting a month and possibly more if you participate in the town's economic development initiatives?
I don't see any problem at all.
Are you familiar with the town's recent plans and projects, and do you agree with the objectives outlined in those?
Yes, I do.
Here's the long one. Culver has focused on the mission of Stellar Town year-round. The purpose of this was to find ways to bring full-time residents back to town so that we could improve specific data points such as our population, the school population, and so on. We are currently working on establishing a plan for economic development. What are your thoughts on what our mission should be for economic development? Or do you think Culver needs to focus on a specific area of economic development, such as workforce development or growth?
Well, I think both, but I think I'm more inclined to look at economic development as far as workforce development and so forth, because I think we've gone around for years, and as long as we're competing with the academy parents for housing, it's just real estate prices in this town are just out of sight. And I just don't see that. I think it's important that we work toward affordable housing, but I think the first real effort should be toward workforce development. We need to bring people back into town that are working.
Do you support an economic development vision that includes quality of life initiatives such as trails and that includes potential residential development? Also, would you support potential property acquisition if the town or CRC wanted to build a town hall, a shell building, or some other investment? Please explain.
I strongly support that, with the exception of the shell building. I think that I'd be a little more conservative as far as the shell building is concerned, because I think that we really need to identify what type of economic entity that we're bringing into town. If it's going to be something to do with communications, call center, or something like that, that's a different type of a structure than what you would have for manufacturing. But I would support both.
Culver is rural and our resources and funds are limited. Many of our current projects have been paid for with grant funds. Do you support a redevelopment commission making matches on those grants? And please explain to the best of your knowledge when you would or would not support this. I
fully support it. I think I take it one step further. I think that part of the responsibilities of the redevelopment committee or commission also would be ongoing funding to support ongoing support for the grant programs that we receive grants for.
What do you think uniquely qualifies you to be on the Culver Redevelopment Commission in terms of either your experience or knowledge of economic development?
Well, back in my working days, I was involved in investment banking and municipal finance and finance underwriting. So I think I have a pretty good idea of what is required communities, what are required communities and so forth for economic development.
Can you provide us an example of when you participated on another town initiative, board, or project that showcases the skills or leadership you can offer the CRC?
I can think of a couple. I've served 2 terms as the county coroner, and I was instrumental in developing our Marshall County disaster plan. I also served a term on the Marshall County Property Tax Board of Appeals, and we were in the process then of setting up the new parameters for reassessment.
That was our last question.
Yeah, from a scheduling standpoint, Bill, would you, as a CRC member, be willing to participate in the economic development initiatives that we've gotten underway with a consultant and trying to progress having a vision and plan for Culver, an economic development plan, if you will.
Okay, will you repeat that?
Sure, and I'll
Without
take
your
off the
pants.
mask too, because it's really thick. The Economic Development Initiative that we've started with Cheryl, as a CRC member, would you be willing to participate in that as a stakeholder? Because I think we started off with these sort of series of summits and really just have scratched the surface of that. And personally, I'd like to see the town have an actual economic development plan. And I think the CRC will be really important in helping develop that vision and plan.
I think the CRC and the town council together are the logical entities to put a plan like that in place.
Thank you.
Anything further?
Nope. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
That is all your applications. So,
Great. Thank you so much for organizing all of this. And staying on track is really, I didn't see how we would be able
Me
to do
neither.
it,
I
but.
didn't
Here till midnight. So,
And I thought the candidates did a fantastic job being, off the seat of their pants and not prepared for what we were coming at them with. So thank you to everyone who participated, and those who are online, thank you for serving as residents to witness the process. And we will reconvene at a regular council meeting and make our appointments. Thanks.
good night, everybody.
Good night.
Night.